Now, of course, as we mentioned earlier, foreign ministers from the BRICS nations are meeting in Brazil. And let's delve further into the significance of that meeting. We're now joined by William Lee. He's a chief economist at the Milken Institute. Great to have you on the show with us today, sir. Now, of course, the world is watching this meeting pretty closely because it will reveal the group's harmony and also its strategy in its response to these escalating trade tensions and, of course, those tariffs from the U.S. What are your expectations from this meeting?
Well, this is going to be a very important meeting. As you know, the BRICS nations, and especially the ones who are aspiring to be the BRICS nations, collectively represent about half the world's population and just under half the world's GDP. And this is a very growing, dynamic group of nations that are trying to get together to improve the trading system. We should all acknowledge, I think, that the trading system as it exists today was built by the United States after World War II to try to develop the countries that were involved in the war and were so devastated by that World War II. But since then, the 21st century has seen an enormous change in the world economy. The BRICS nations themselves are really the source of that very dynamic change. Many of these countries are now entering into what economists call the middle class. They are now changing the development strategies in a way that no longer require them to be just purely commodity exporters, but rather development strategies that will bring them into the high technologies and the high value-added industries of the world. And
well, it looks like we lost him there. Oh, it looks like we have him back. Mr. Lee, can you hear me? Please do go ahead with your point.
Yes, I can. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Please do go ahead with your point.
Yes, well, as I said, the meeting is very important because this dynamic group of countries has to decide how it's going to govern itself and what the high priority items are to reshape the world global trading system. And that's what I expect out of this next set of meetings.
Well, speaking about reshaping the world global trading system, we know this meeting follows the IMF also downgrading the global growth forecast. It also warned starkly about the global economic outlook. How critical is the BRICS grouping and, of course, its mandate going forward to member nations and to reshaping also that global trading landscape?
It'll be absolutely very critical because the nature of the future agreements that we will see in the 21st century will no longer be these large multilateral agreements that we saw in the past. I think we'll see more regional associations, more bilateral agreements, because each country has their own strategy. Each country has their own trading needs. And I think it's easier for countries to negotiate bilaterally or in small groups because, as every political scientist knows, the large groups are subject to the tyranny of the minority. One country can block the passage of an agreement just because it wants its own way. And I think the future will be one where the BRIC countries themselves will be agreeing on different trade policies with themselves and also with the developed world like the United States and in Europe.
Right. And of course, these escalating trade threats, they're not the only issues on the table. We know they'll be talking about the Russia-Ukraine conflict, amongst others. What are the other crises you think that this BRICS grouping will be taking head on at this meeting?
One of the most important decisions that has to be made would be the governance of artificial intelligence and how it's being developed and how its technology is being spread around the world. The United States and China represent the focal points of these two as two economies that are developing artificial intelligence at very rapid paces, and the technology is spreading to the BRIC world. Jensen Huang, the head of NVIDIA, is going around the world to each sovereign country and saying each country's data is its own natural resource and needs to be developed in a very strategic way for the benefits of its own people. And I think this is one of the areas where this development strategies will allow BRIC countries to leapfrog the development stages into a very advanced stage and high income world very quickly.
And before we let you go, I'd like to find out how much of a threat you think the current global economic climate is to BRICS countries. For example, what does this escalating trade conflict mean for BRICS countries? How significant of a threat will it be to the grouping going forward?
That's a great question. I think a lot of the talk about tariffs and how the United States tariff strategy is hurting the BRIC countries and developing world in general. I think one thing you should keep in mind is that, again, the strategy behind President Trump is to reshape this world trading system in a way that allows more smaller regional agreements. And some countries, like, for example, South Africa, one of the largest countries in Africa, it only trades about 8% of its exports to the United States. So even though it's faced with very high tariffs, it's not the main reason why the IMF downgraded its forecast. Their own internal problems are some of the things that they have to resolve, as the IMF has pointed out. So I think one of the things that we need to keep in mind is really how much of the U.S. is part of the problem and how much of it is just the internal problems of each individual country trying to find its way into a better economic setting.
Well, we'll certainly be watching it closely. Thank you so much, Mr. Lee, for joining us on the show. Thank you for those great insights today. That, of course, was William Lee. He's a chief economist at the Milken Institute.